Eric Drooker's drawings and posters are a familiar sight in the global street art movement, and his paintings appear frequently on the covers of The New Yorker. Born and raised in New York City, he began to slap his images on the streets as a teenager. Since then, his reputation as a social critic has grown and has led to countless editorial illustrations for The Nation, The New York Times, The Progressive, and more. Eric's first book, Flood, a Novel in Pictures, won the American Book Award, followed by Blood Song. His graphic novels have been translated into French, German, Italian, Korean, Portuguese, Spanish, and Turkish. After designing the animation for the film Howl, he was hired by DreamWorks Animation. His art is in the permanent collections of many museums, including the Whitney, the Museum of Modern Art, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Library of Congress. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Eric Drooker. Tell me about Naked City, man. Where did it start and how did it evolve?
That's a good question. And I didn't start calling it Naked City till I was practically finished with it. The working title for a couple of years there was Street Song, because the protagonist, the young woman, is a musician, and she starts out playing music on the street and down in the subways before she's discovered one evening. And then she's not making much money at first, and she gets this job as a model working for this artist who wants to paint her. And I thought, okay, Naked City. There's that 1945 book by Ouija, book of photographs, Naked City. I guess Ouija coined that term, but it's been used. In 1948, there was a film noir, that crime black and white flick called Naked City. And then there was even a TV series in the late 50s. There are 8 million people in the Naked City. 8 million stories, and this has been one of them, right? But so I'm really goofing on that, because this is literally, it's a story about naked people and nudity and all the implications of that. And then the story kind of evolved by itself. I imagine a lot of authors or novelists say this, that I'm not sure really where it came from. The characters appeared first. The first character to arrive was the window washer, the dude with the squeegee, the aggressive squeegee man. But he's actually quite gentle, we discover by the end. You just don't want to get him mad. But he was the first character that I came up with some years ago. I thought it would be really interesting to tell a story through the eyes of someone who washed windows. Old school, who came down on the cable, washing windows of office buildings, one window at a time, and what they must see during the course of the day. Dozens of windows, and each window, they see things by accident, maybe things that they shouldn't have seen. Mm-hmm. So that was the original idea, but it ended up veering off in a whole different direction. And the protagonist ended up being this 18 or 19-year-old woman from Detroit, I guess she was. She hitchhikes from the Midwest, comes to the big city. So most of it is through the eyes of a young woman. And then the painter, I suppose, is the comic relief in an otherwise pretty serious story.
What was it like working with dialogue? Your 2 full-length works before this are wordless. At least the 2 that I know of are wordless.
Yes, it's true. The previous, and I'm calling it a trilogy now. The first 2 volumes of the trilogy don't have any words at all to speak of. So this is a departure to use word balloons and captions and the full vocabulary of the comic strip. The vocabulary I suppose I was drawing from on the first 2 books was less comic strip or comic book. It was obviously sequential art, but I was real influenced when I was really young by Franz Massaril and Lind Ward, his American counterpart. I couldn't have been more than 11 or 12 when my grandfather came down from the Bronx one day. Whenever he visited, he would always give us books. He was always like giving out books, usually art books. And I remember one day he said, "Eric, take a look at this. It's a whole story, big, long story, without any words in it. The whole story is told in pictures." And I said, "Hey, that's kind of cool. I've never seen that before." Not only was it told in pictures, but they were weird pictures.
Yeah.
They were these woodcuts, a series of woodcuts, but hundreds of them in sequence. Frans Masereel, who was a Belgian expressionist, he's often grouped with the German expressionists, but he was most active in the 1920s and 1930s, and he would do these woodcut novels. He did a whole series of them. And they were long out of print and out of fashion when I was 12. When was this? In the 1970s? But my grandfather was always turning people on to cool stuff like that. And he also turned me on to Lynn Ward, who was an American who was also influenced by Frans Masereel. And he did a whole series of these wood engraving. Engravings are technically a little different than wood cuts.
Yeah.
But we could get into the
give me the
details
technical
of
stuff
that
later.
Yeah. Getting into the weeds here. But so that was the idiom that I was really aspiring to, like a sequence of woodcuts. I wasn't working in linoleum or wood. I was using scratchboard, but it gives a similar effect. Rather than gliding over the surface with a pen or a brush, you're scratching into the surface with a blade, with the razor. You're drawing with a razor blade. So it's a very visceral way of working, and it's a subtractive process. In other words, the ink is already there.
Yeah.
And you're removing it. You're scratching it off. And it lends itself to expressionist themes or political themes. So many of the street posters I've done in the neighborhood over the years were using that scratchboard technique, just because it has this really what would you say? I mean, it just looks really handmade.
I don't want to say primitive, but the handmade's a better...
Jagged, kind of unfinished. The husk, it's like corn on the cob, but the husk is still kind of there. Mm-hmm. The new book, Naked City, is more traditional. This was pen and ink, and this is a book where I was kind of letting go of that earlier aesthetic and just the tragic themes, because I realized, hey, life is already tragic, especially in these last 6 or 7 years. Shit is all fucked up now. If I'm going to be telling a story now, I want it to at least be funny.
Yeah.
Right? Why add more bleak tragedy or gravitas to an already dead serious situation? So I decided that this one would be a comedy, or at least a tragic comedy, and this one would have words in it. There'd be word balloons, captions, thought balloons, the whole, all of the tools
the idiom
from the comic strip.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? I'd been kind of holding it at bay all these years. I suppose it's partly an experiment, those earlier books. I wanted to challenge myself and see how much of a story, how involved of an actual novel can I write without resorting to any words at all. And I found that you could go pretty far, right? I mean, do the math. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
There it is. So if you do a book of 300 pages, that's 300,000 words.
Again, getting the Robert Caro comparison. I'm just kidding. But
Robert Caro, yeah, that guy's always on my reading list.
Well, you've got that 1,100 page thing to worry about, but yeah.
Now, he was from the Bronx. He's a native New Yorker, right?
Yeah, I know I just watched a documentary a couple of weeks ago, too, about him and Robert Gottlieb, and I'm blanking on where he actually grew up. He's a New Yorker, but I just forget which borough.
My mother is born and raised in the Bronx. So when I grew up in this neighborhood right here on Avenue B and 14th Street, about 5 blocks away from where where we're sitting now. But we were always going up to the Bronx to visit the grandparents and the grandfather who was always giving books on every occasion. So that's that was the major influence. If you were going to be asking me, what are your influences? It's really just the city itself, growing up in this neighborhood, and also going up to the Bronx and just seeing everything in between, all of the extremes, all of the different strata of society, from like super wealthy uptown, and then you go to Midtown, and then you keep walking south, and you go south of 14th Street, where we are now, and it's a whole
Things get weird.
Different culture, and it's way more unpredictable down here. And it was way more unpredictable back then when I was coming of age here. It was Loisaita, which is the Nuyorican word for Lower East Side. At a certain point, landlords started referring to it on their maps as the East Village. They tried to rebrand the neighborhood, because Lower East Side, that smacks of Jacob Riis and photographs and people sleeping on the fire escape and on the roof.
The whole tubercular vibe.
All of that. And the Ashcan School of Painters, all that stuff. And that's way out of fashion. Landlords prefer the abstract art, something abstract that they could hang up on the vestibule of their building that won't have too much content in it. But it was the Lower East Side when I was growing up. That's what this was. And the Village was way on the west side. But now, if you look at a map, like a subway map of New York City, this is called the East Village, and the Lower East Side is way down below Delancey Street.
Yeah. When I mentioned to my wife I was coming to Lower East Side to record, she just said, "Oh my God, really?" And then I looked on the map. I'm like, "Well, to us it's a Lower East Side, but yes, this is pretty close to Stuytown and not far from."
A stone's throw from Stuytown.
Yeah.
And of course, Stuytown and this whole area, this was in the 19th century. This was the gas house district.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, which again could be a graphic novel about old New York at some point, if it turns from a trilogy into a tetralogy.
Yes.
But
there was the Gas House Gang, the notorious Gas House Gang, which was the most infamous of all and feared of all of the gangs in the mid-19th century. That's the era of gangs from New York, the 5 Points and all that.
Right.
But the most feared gang was the Gas House Gang that was here. That was like from 12th Street to about 22nd Street, from the river up to, about 1st Avenue or so. It was really along the east side.
So why'd you leave New York?
Well,
it's not too personal to ask.
I didn't really leave. I do a lot of back and forth, But
I'll say your area code when you called was a California area code. So,
Right, that's right. Well, hey, you have to pay extra for the 212 area code.
Yeah.
Everyone's got like a 916 area code.
917.
917, wherever they're living now. Yeah. No, but
what took you from the city, I guess?
Why did I ever think that I could escape?
And it was
Escape
from New York.
It was foolhardy to think I could. My signal to leave town was when Rudolph Giuliani was re-elected mayor. The first time it was sort of like a trial period, like, the public didn't realize what they were getting into. Sort of like the public, the election was stolen, they didn't realize. But then when the guy gets re-elected, I said, okay, I'll see you guys later. I've born and raised on the east side of Manhattan. I always kind of liked the Bay Area. I got some friends out there. I think I'll go over there for a few months and just see till this thing blows over. And then I've been bi-coastal ever since. Oh. Yeah.
I was going to say, you mentioned the squeegee man earlier, and I know from my history, Giuliani and the squeegee men was not the street squeegee men were not a good couple. Since he really had the whole, let's kill them, and that'll stop people from squeegeeing. And
remember Giuliani? He had the quality of life crimes that he had, like public urination, jumping over subway turnstile, and then aggressive squeegee men. The guys who were so desperate that they go out, all they own is a squeegee.
And then try and get
as
you at a
they're
traffic
driving,
light and just...
you stop at a red light. Your windshield is perfectly clean, thank you. But the guy comes up with the rag and the squeegee. And he goes, that's okay. It's on the house. Those guys, I always noticed those guys since I was a kid. And I thought, whoa, I'd like to tell a story, from that guy's point of view. Especially when Rudolph Giuliani started scapegoating the aggressive squeegee men. Like, this is what we really have to fear. Everyone is supposed to be frightened of these squeegee men, and he really zeroed in on them. Yeah. So that's I guess the genesis of that character, who in many ways kind of is the secret hero of Naked City.
I will say, hearkening back to the question about word balloons and integrating a lot of comics vocabulary, I have to say the most affecting parts of the book are still the wordless ones. You still bring it when it comes to wordless storytelling. It's not like the book solely relies on, now we're going to have a lot of explication. You still bring out so much through the visuals and the artwork. I'm thinking especially of the closing part, but we won't talk about that. So
yeah, we don't want to give too much of it away, but it's true. Of the 5 chapters, the first 4.5, it's all people talking, and there's dialogue and all of the tools. I even use captions here and there. But then by the end, I guess those last, 50 pages or so, I had words, but I eliminated them. I think when it's wordless, when it's silent, there's something more. What would you say, Gil? Is almost a more emotional, or it hits you on a different level. It's not that language part of the brain, and it's more interactive. Yeah. You're
engaging with it. Yeah.
You have to spend more time kind of almost decoding what the image is saying.
So how comfortable did you get with adopting those modes of storytelling? I know, like I say, the ending, becomes its own Drooker-esque section, but
getting back to my wordless roots.
But yeah, what was it like for you? Just learning
a
different
curve.
mode.
It was definitely a learning curve.
Yeah.
And getting confident with, and even drawing the empty word balloons.
Yeah, just knowing how to
thing.
Space things are different.
Spacing them out, because I thought, hey, they're kind of in the way. There's some of these word bubbles. I had just drawn this beautiful tenement with all the fire escape, the steps just right, and now that's going to be overlapped, with the big old word balloon. And pretty soon I realized, no. You pencil it in, and you don't ink it in until after you fool.
Still learning how to make comics at this age. Still
learning about the word balloons. It was I was kind of what do they say, reverse engineering it. But as I was learning about using verbal language, because the picture language is also a language, I suppose.
It's still writing, but it's go on.
Yeah, it's like maybe the Merriam-Webster's 3rd or 4th definition. Any system of symbols could be called a language, but it's certainly not verbal language. So it was slow, and I realized at a certain point, hey, I'm recapitulating my childhood, because I was very slow on the uptake when it came to reading and writing. Mm-hmm. There's always some kid in the class who's not getting with the program. It took me a really long time to learn how to read. Yeah. And I was real quiet as a kid, as a 7, 8-year-old kid. I was real quiet. Just the adults were always a little concerned about me, the teachers, all the authority figures. Well, I don't know what we should do about Eric. He was just there again in the corner, just very quietly drawing pictures, very strange pictures, but he wasn't saying very much. So there's that I feel like is just, I guess, must be part of my my way of communicating is visually. I feel like pictures are my native tongue. Yeah. And even if you want to, use recapitulate human evolution. Not to get all Yuval Noah Harari on you, Gil, but 30, 40,000 years ago, before he had any written language, we were already drawing pictures on the walls of caves then. And in fact, we were really good at it. 40,000 BC. We already were, if you look at that work on the walls of Lascaux, France, or Spain, it's already as modern as anything Picasso or Jean Moreau was doing. It's totally down. They got it down to just the few essential lines. You know, it's extremely modern. So I'm also exploring some of those themes in the story. The painter, in a couple of dream sequences, goes back in time, and he's drawing these bison or, you know, cave paintings, and that's I always felt very close to those guys. Mm-hmm. The guys back then, we don't know. I mean, we don't really know the circumstances. It's a wild guess. What do they say in the textbooks or the art history books? At the very, very beginning, they all start the first same way. Before,
caves and Altamira.
Yes, before they even show any Egyptian art or hieroglyphs, the very first page, the frontispiece, there's some primitive cave painting from the walls of some cave, Lascaux or something like that. And since I was a child, that always jumped out at me. I always just felt an emotional connection with whoever those artists were. They always say, well, this was obviously some form of early primitive hunting magic, right? The hunt, because we, you know, hunter and gatherers.
Evoke it by actually
but who the fuck? They don't. 30,000 years ago, I don't think we have a clue where people were. Yeah, maybe it was some type of primitive hunting magic, but for all we know, all of those cave paintings throughout Europe and Africa could have all been drawn by some secret cult of Neanderthal teenage girls. The only ones permitted, or the only ones who had the skills and the chops to draw pictures on the wall. It's all guesswork, you know. And the more that we're discovering now through the DNA evidence about Neanderthals, they actually were doing a lot of these. They used tools, they buried their dead, etc. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were drawing pictures on the walls of caves.
And so you found a new art mode.
Yes, and of course graffiti. Growing up in the era, coming of age in the 1970s, and being a part-time graffiti writer myself. Whenever I was drawing on the tiled walls of the subways, I always went back in time to drawing on the walls of caves. Yeah. You know, what seems to be the problem, officer? No, I'm just doing my job. I've been doing this job for the last 30,000 years, Your Honor.
They never fall for that for some reason.
Yeah, no, somehow they never seem to grasp what I'm getting at.
Where'd the street art begin for you?
Vandalism, as far as we're concerned. It's a quality of life crime.
But where did street art start for you?
Let's see. What was it, first examples of street art?
Were you? Yeah, but was there either something you saw that I got to start doing this, or was it just
It's interesting, you know, because I was that generation when there was the mushrooming of graffiti art on the subways. In my childhood, there was always some graffiti and, you know, writing on the walls. Everything from pray to fuck you was on the walls of the subways, and you know, those were the most ubiquitous things. But you didn't really see people's initials and wild, you know, colorful graffiti that really started to kick in the early 70s, and it caught on really quickly. Before then, it really was just a very sporadic thing.
Kilroy was here, you know.
Kilroy, that kind of thing, or someone loves so and so, or, you know, for a good time, call 260-2036. But I guess the most common was just fuck you and pray.
Yeah.
And the subways all through the 70s, that word pray was carved right into the wall.
Yeah.
And every single subway car. And you'd go through, you'd be in the IRT, the BMT, the L train, Canarsie line, whatever car you were on, you realize, hey, pray is written in every. It's not that someone wrote them on most of the subway cars, all of them. Someone systematically went around writing that. So this leads me into my first, or one of my first forays into doing street art myself. when I was a good bit older, I guess I was about 19 years old, I hadn't seen too much stencil art yet. I'd seen one or two examples and went, hey, no one's doing that yet. You could cut a stencil with an X-Acto blade and go out at 2 a.m. with a can of spray paint and just hit them up all over the place, like very efficiently. Walk from the east side to the west side, which is what I did. I got a couple of cans of purple spray paint. I don't remember if I actually paid for them or not in the hardware store, but I think it was Krylon was the brand. And I started out, I guess it was Soho. I think they were calling it Soho by then, and the West Village. And I was walking around with a stencil cut silhouette of someone with an umbrella, very mysterioso.
Yeah.
Like just like a profile of someone with an umbrella. Even the gender was a little
Indeterminate.
Indeterminate. That's the word, Gil. He was the person.
I was an editor.
He was a person of indeterminate gender. All you know for certain is that it was some humanoid, shadowy figure holding an umbrella and moving like rapidly in one direction. It looks like they were maybe running or something. But so semi-abstract, but kind of very cryptic. If you're gonna hit an image without any text.
Yeah, you want something that arrests but doesn't actually explain itself.
Make it real mysterious. Yeah. Keep them guessing. Make it cryptic. Make it really poignant. So I started spraying. Oh, and it was. I guess they were about 10 inches high, each one. So it wasn't. They weren't life-size silhouettes or anything like that. They were bite-size. Each one would take me about 5 or 10 seconds. And I'd look over my shoulder to make sure there weren't any cop cars or anything, because they bust you for graffiti. And I hit up all of West Broadway, and then I guess I crossed through Washington Square Park, hit a couple of purple umbrella people under the arch in Washington Square Park, about eye level, kept walking through the West Village up Fifth Avenue. I guess I took a right turn on 8th Street and just walked east through the East Village, spray painting these purple silhouettes of mysterious umbrella people along the way. And I got a few hundred of them that first night. I think I only went out on 2 or 3 occasions. And then I felt like I had really saturated the neighborhood. You don't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
Keep it mysterious. Always leave them a little hungry and always keep them guessing. But it was labor intensive and it's stressful because you're always having to keep your eyes peeled. Ideally, years later when I started wheat pasting posters on the streets, I learned the hard way that you always want to have someone
spotter.
Yeah, someone whose job it is just to be looking around to make sure there are no police coming or any irate citizens walking in your direction. But this is before I learned that. I was solo. I was just going around with the purple cans. And when I went out a week later, I noticed that someone had crossed one of them out, like very violently with a big fat black magic marker, a big X through it. Like they were canceling my umbrella person, like decades before canceling was a thing, you know? And then I said, well, I wonder what that's all about. And then I got to the next block, and again,
another X.
Someone had X'd it right out. And then I went, well, don't they realize how labor intensive that was? I was risking arrest and worse, spray painting these umbrella people 2, 3 in the morning, and then again an X. And I walked around Lower Manhattan, and someone, some mean-spirited someone who obviously hated art and the arts, had X'd every last one of them systematically. He'd gone around like reverse, the East Village, then walked down Fifth Avenue, onto Washington Square Park, and down through West Broadway, Xing out every last one of them. And I was kind of bitter about it because, you know, you build something when you're a kid, you build something out of blocks, you spend half an hour.
Kid comes over, just knocks them off the table.
All it takes is someone to just, 2 seconds to knock it all down. That's where I learned about politics, how difficult it is to create or build something, but then some destructive or someone with a violent impulse could completely undo, 100 years of history in 2 seconds by just blowing it up or kicking it over or crossing it out with a black magic marker. And it wasn't until about 40 years later that I discovered who the culprit was. I was a young teenager, an 18-year-old kid from Brooklyn named Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Yep.
Years later, I learned, and he even had a whole alibi. No, man. When I cross something out or X something out, I'm drawing attention to it.